Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second session of Learning DITA Live. I'm Alan Pringle, and I'll be moderating this session. Learning DITA Live is brought to you by Scriptorium, the content strategy experts. Since 1997, Scriptorium has helped companies manage, structure, organize, and distribute content in an efficient way. If you're trying to figure out how the DITA model can best support your content, or if you're setting up a DITA system, please contact us. We would love to work with you. LearningDITA.com and Learning DITA Live would not be possible without the help from our sponsors, and we thank them for their support. I want to tell you a little bit about how this event is going to work. During the webcast, attendees are muted. Even so, we still want your questions and feedback during the presentation. If you would, take the time to locate the chat module and the GoToWebinar interface. You can type in your comments and questions there, and then I will read them to the presenter during the Q&A at the end of this session. Also, during that Q&A session at the end, please look in the questions module and you will see a link to an online survey. We very much want your feedback on these sessions. So with that, I am going to turn things over to our presenter. Octavian, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Alan. I'm here.
Let me turn over things to you so you can begin presenting.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Hello, everybody. My name is Octavian Nadolu, and in the next 45 minutes, we'll talk about business rules and how you can create custom business rules from DITA project for DITA projects, and how you can enforce these rules on your projects. First, let me tell you a few things about me. So I'm a software architect working for Syncro, the company that makes Octavian XML editor. I have more than 15 years experience with XML technologies. I'm contributor to different open source projects. And also I'm a co-editor of the Schematron quick fix specification that is developed within the W3C working group. So here's the agenda of the presentation. We'll talk about business rules in general and business rules that can be enforced using Schematron, how you can apply these rules on the DITA files and how you can apply it on an entire project, and also how you can develop actions called Schematron quick fixes that will allow you to correct the problems reported by business rules. What is a business rule? So a business rule is defined like a constraint. So it specifies a constraint that is always resolved to true or false. So a business rule is either respected or not respected. This is the definition. And it assesses the structure of your project, and it helps you to achieve the goal. So to have the project as you want, as you define it. For DITA, I added a few business rules that we have, for example, in our documentation project, such as titles must be uppercase. So I want in my DITA project to have all the titles uppercase, and I can add this type of rule. Or short description should not exceed 50 characters. Otherwise, it's not a short description anymore. Or I want to avoid empty elements in my project, or I want to avoid semicolon at the end of a list item. So you either add a dot or you don't add any semicolon. Then a list should have more than one list item. Otherwise, why you should have a list? Or another rule would be to have output class set on code blocks. Otherwise, the output will not look as you want when it's published. So these are some examples of rules that you can enforce on a DITA project. And before we continue, I want to address your question. Do you impose business rules on your DITA projects? I'm not sure if Alan has the
I do,
poll.
and I do
Yeah?
have that poll, and let me launch it for you right now.
Okay, thank you.
So I have that up. If you would go ahead and answer that question, I will collect the responses and pass them on to Octavian. I'm going to wait for about another 5 seconds or so. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Right now, it looks like 61% are saying yes, they do impose business rules on projects, with 39%. Now it's gone to 62 and 38. So yes, a large majority does.
This is good, and there are different ways to impose the rules. So you need the rules on your projects, on your documentation projects, and as I told you, there are different ways to do it. And Schematron is one way to impose these rules. Schematron is a language that allows you to make assertions that are always resort to true or false. So it comes to the business rule principle that you are define business rules that are always true or false, so either are respected or not. And Schematron is a language that allows you to make this assertion on XML documents and also on DITA. Schematron is an ISO standard, which is good because it is used by a lot of projects, and you get support from different applications, and the standard is not changed very often, so it's very stable. Let me tell you a few things about the Schematron history. So Schematron was invented by Rick Jalife in 1999, and there were some important releases, 1.3 and 1.5. And after that, there was 1.6 with that became ISO Schematron standard in 2006, and a few releases after that. So it has a few years of existence. So why Schematron? So you can impose rules also with other type of schema, such as XSD, RelaxNG, or DTD. But this type of schemas allows you to specify the structure and the data types. With Schematron, you can do more, or you can do other things. You can impose your custom rules. You can define your messages, and with Schematron, you can also verify data interdependencies that you can with other schema. So you can verify, for example, if the project start date is before the project end date, or you can check data cardinality, or you can also perform complex algorithm checks on the documents using XSLT or using other language. So you can add extensions. And Schematron is also used in a lot of domains. We get a lot of feedback from different domains, from financial, insurance, or government, and also technical publishing, where people are using sensible data and they want to impose their rules and make sure that the information that it's added in the documents is correct and it's conform with what they want to have there. So if you want to have a manual, for example, for a plane, you want to make sure that the information that is there is correct. You don't have something that is missing or something that is wrong. So you need different type of checks. And Schematron, it's simple. So it has only 5 basic elements. There is the assert and the report that will allow you to define the test. The assert and the report are similar. So the report is a reverse of the assert. Then you have the rule element that will allow you to set the context for what element you want to add that rule, and the pattern that will group similar rules, and the schema, which is just the root, the schema root. So it's not a complicated language. Let's see now some example of rules that you can add to your documentation projects. And the first one is to create semicolon at the end of a list item. You either add a full stop or you remove this semicolon from the end of a list item. Otherwise, we don't want to have on each list item a semicolon added. I will show you also in the application how this looks like. So you'll have this DITA project with some rules here, and I open one of them, and we see that I'm notified that here I have some semicolon at the end of a list item. So I can either remove this semicolon from here, or I can replace it with a full stop, and the problems will disappear. Another interesting example is if you have a scale attribute on an image. So we had this problem in our user manual. We don't want to have a scaling made dynamically, and we want to make sure that our images that are scaled with an image tool. So you could add this type of rule, and I have here an example also, and I have an image that is scaled. If I display the attributes, I see that the scale for this image is 200. So I can remove the scaling, and this is the original image. So I want to have the image like this, and if I want to be bigger, then I need to use an image tool. Otherwise, it will not be scaled properly, and it will not be displayed correctly in the output. Another example would be with list items. So you could split, for example, list items by mistake, and it's hard to determine. For example, here I have two list items, and there is a small space between these two items. And this means that the list item was split, list was split by mistake. So you can add a rule that will automatically determine this problem, and you can either add a description here before this list item, or you can merge the two lists. And the same rule you can apply it for ordered list. Here it's easier to see the problem, so see that we have two ordered lists here, but also in this case you want to add the description before the list, otherwise it's not okay to have this. And I'll show you also in the application how this looks like. So I have here the list items, and I can delete the previous list and merge with the current one, and now everything will be okay. And I have another one which is an order list, and here also I have split it by mistake, and I can add a new list, a description here, and also everything will be okay. So you can easily add this type of rules also for order list. Another example would be to have to check if a list contains more than one list item. So maybe you remove some of the list items by mistake, and the list will contain only one list item. Then you could add a rule that will sign a list problem. So you either add a new list item in the list, or you remove the list and just keep the paragraph. And I will show you also this example. So I have here a list with only one list item, and if I say, okay, I want to add a new list item here, then the problem will be solved. If I will remove this list item, then I'll be signed that it's not okay to have only one list item. And I'll show you how the Schematron rules looks in this case. So we notice that the rule is set on the unordered list and then counts the number of list items from this unordered list and asserts that the number of list items must be greater than 1. So this rule should be true. Otherwise, if it's not true, the message will be displayed to the user. A list must have more than one list item. So in this way, you can add a Schematron assertion. Another example is with styling. So we want to avoid, for example, to have styling in the titles such as bold or italic, and we want to have all the titles written in the same form. So you could add a rule also for this type of problem. And when you are writing some topic and you have this bold or italic in title, you need to remove it. Otherwise, the problem will be highlighted to you. And in this case, the Schematron rule will look something like this. So you'll set the context on the title element, and you'll say that you want the name, the children element, to be different from PH. And in case it's different from PH, you report a problem, in fact. So you have a report here, and when the name is different from PH, then the problem will be displayed to the user. So in this case, I used a report. If I will use an assertion, then I will assert that the name is PH only. So the children name must be only PH. So this way you can create rules for your project. Now let's see how you can integrate this and how you can validate your project, your DITA project with Schematron. So you can associate a Schematron file with the XML or with a DITA file by using this processing instruction that will specify the URL of the Schematron file. So you can associate this directly in the file, or you can use tool-specific options such as project options or options that will validate all the files, the files that have a specific type with the Schematron. And I will show you some examples. So let me close these files first. And I'll open the first DITA file and go to the text page to see the processing instruction. So you can associate this using the XML processing instruction, XML model processing instruction on the first level. And this will be automatically used to validate DITA with the Schematron. If you don't want to associate with every file, then you need to use some tool-specific options. For example, you could go to associate with the entire project, and you can say that in my project, I want to use some custom rules for the DITA files and all my DITA files to use, for example, this rule advanced Schematron file, like I did in my project. So now I have these rules applied automatically on all my files. When I open a file, automatically the rules are applied because I have this association. And you can also validate, for example, an entire project and specify here the rules advanced here. Another way to validate is to use the command line or use xproc or ant to check the files using Schematron. And I'll show you some example how you can impose and how you can impose rules from xproc, or how you can use ant to create a report with rules that are imposed for your project. I have here some examples. Let me close these files first. So the first one is with xproc. I have an xproc file which will validate this dog XML file. That is very simple, has just an element called dog, and it requires that the dog should have a bone element. So if I go to the Schematron file, it's a simple Schematron file that will say the dog should have a bone element. So I can run this validation also from xproc, just specifying here the XML document. Then you have this validation with Schematron element that will allow you to specify the Schematron file and also where the result will be generated. And this time the result is a Schematron validation report language. So it will generate a report with problems detected in the XML file. I'll run this xproc file from Oxygen. You can run it also from the command line, and this will generate an SVRL file that will look something like this, and we'll have this failed assertion, say that the dog element doesn't have the bone, and generates a text with the content of the assertion. If I change the XML file and I add here the bone element and save the document, now if I run again the transformation, it will regenerate the SVRL file, and this time we see that the rule passed, so it will not be triggered anymore. You can do the same thing also from the ant build, and I have an example also with the ant here. There is a build file, and I defined here some variables, some properties. I have this rule advanced Schematron file that I'll use to validate, and this DITA that I want to validate with. And I use for validation the XSL files from the Schematron GitHub page. So these are the XSL that comes with the GitHub project for Schematron. And this compiles the Schematron, then applies it on the XML file and generates an SVRL file also. So generates a report. And I extended a little bit, and I generated also from the report, from the SVRL file, I generated a result HTML just to look better. I'll run this build file. As I told you, you can run it from command line. There is no problem. It's easier for me to run it from here. And this will generate a distribution folder, this SVRL file that contains the failed assertions and the successful reports. And you can see that each of these reports have the test, but also the location as an XPath and the description. And I have also the result HTML file that contains only, let me switch to author. This contains only the message, the failed assertion or the reports that were okay. So you can also, let's say, filter the report and present to the user only the part that it interests the user. So this is another way to do the check. So you can use from xproc, or you can use an ant to check your documents. Let's talk now about the validation result. So you can have different type of problems in your project. So you can have code smells, you can have bugs, you can have vulnerabilities, and you can also set different severities to fatal error, warning, or information, depending on how you want to present this problem to the user and how important it's for your project. The severity of the message must be set using the role attribute. So on the assert, you can set this role attribute that can have one of the values from here, the fatal, error, warning, or information. And depending on these values, the message can be presented differently to the user. So it can have different icons or different color. You can present the information with blue. And in an editing framework, as you've seen, you can have these highlights presented to the user. You can have also a result presented like the messages. I will show you an example for one file here. So I'll open this DITA file. And if I will validate it has already associated the Schematron file, it will present the rules here, and you can see that you have different colors. Then you have these highlights also in the editor. You can have also validation type in an editor, in an editing environment. And you can also export the result, for example, and I don't know, pass it to someone, can save the result as an HTML file and then present it to someone, something like this. Then you can have this Schematron validation language, Schematron validation report language that will allow you to see the problems, and then you can process them maybe later. And in this report, you see that we have the test here, the test that is added in the Schematron file. You have also the role, so you can maybe present it differently to the user, and you have the location like as an expat and the message that is in the Schematron file. So you can generate also this type of reports. And as you've seen from the report, you can extract only the important part, maybe only the failed assertions and the problems that are reported, and present them to the user. And of course, you can have an integration, for example, with an integration server such as Jenkins or Travis. We have this type of support. And as the user commits or add information in the repository, you can automatically check these rules and send him a report with the problems or if everything is okay. And you can do this with by, I don't know, passing the SVRL language or processing this report and pass the HTML file. You can also generate automatically the schema rules. For example, if you have a style guide, you have the rules defined in a document where you define how you write the content, how what type of words should not be used or should be used. Then you can annotate this style guide and automatically generate also the Schematron rules from it. And I have here an example of such a project. It's an intelligent integrated style guide. It's an open source project available on GitHub. And I'll open it right now to see it. So it's created by my colleague, George Bina. And you have here on the GitHub page different information how to clone it and how to use it, how this works. I will just show you an example. So you can open this sample file. This is opened in the Oxygen XML web author. And here you have some rules that are enforced on the sample files. For example, the title should have more than 10 characters. And you can go to see also the style guide from here. So these are imposed using this style guide that is in the project. And here is defined that the title should have more than no more than 50 characters, and the minimum number is 10. And there is also some information here, like the name of the element that you want to check, which is title, and uh, the number of characters. And based on this information, you can generate the Schematron rules that applied. And I can also edit this style guide, and it's opened also in the author. I don't have right access because I didn't clone this. And here I can change, for example, and I say, okay, I want only the minimum number to be 6. And when I save this, this automatically will trigger a Travis build, and will generate the style guide again. Then the rules will be applied according to what I type here. And I can also add new rules. For example, let's say I can add a new paragraph, and then here I can say that I want to add a new rule, and I can choose between some predefined rules. So here are some rules that are generic. So it says avoid word in element, but doesn't say in what word and in what element. And you need to specify these parameters, and you can specify different words and different elements. So you have some generic rules that you can choose and use it to create new rules. For example, I choose to avoid word in element, and then I need to add the parameters that are the element that I want to avoid word in it, let's say title. And then I want to avoid oxygen, for example, in title, and the message to the user be avoid, I don't know, avoid oxygen in title. And also this rule will be generated automatically as I save. I do this right now because it will take a while to regenerate this build again. So you can use this project if you want. You can get inspired from the rules that are here in this library. These are generic rules. So this project is based on a library of generic rules, as I told you, such as avoid word in certain element, or you can limit the number of characters, or you can avoid duplicate content. And in order to implement such a project, you can use in Schematron abstract patterns that will allow you to define these generic rules, and the user just pass the value that they want to use it in the pattern, such as the word or the element or the number of characters that they want to use. So this is another way to generate automatically the Schematron rules, and you can have some generic ones. Next, let's talk about Schematron quick fixes. So yes, it's okay to have rules, it's okay to enforce them, but you need also to correct them somehow. So Schematron quick fix allows you to define actions that will allow you to correct these problems. So Schematron is used to correct the problem or to provide a solution for the assertions message from the Schematron. And it's similar with the spell check. If you think of the spell checker, it allows you to correct the problem when you misspell a word. It helps you to easily correct the problem just by clicking on the form of the word. But it's more complex because it allows you to correct multiple problems, or it allows you to make different fixes like the table layout, or I don't know, generate different IDs. So it gets more complex as you develop your actions. We define two type of users. So usually there is a content writer that is an expert and knows very well the documentation, knows how to write the documentation. For example, let's say he's in the automotive industry and he knows what to write in the documentation about, he knows the content. And then it's the XML expert that knows the structure but doesn't know very well the content. So when a problem appears and a business rule is presented to the user, then the user the content writer needs to correct it, and sometime he doesn't know to correct it, or maybe he breaks something in the document when corrects the problem. So he needs to contact an XML expert, and he will lose time to contact him, and maybe the XML expert don't know how to fix, and they need to work together. So a way to avoid this type of problems, you can uh, impose some actions that will correct this problem. So the XML expert can create also these Schematron quick fix, these actions that will allow you to correct the problem, and then the content writer will be able to do this by himself. So what is SQF, or the Schematron quick fix? It's an extension of the Schematron standard, of the ISO Schematron standard, and it allows you to define these fixes. And it's very simple, so you need to add this SQF attribute on the assertion or on the report. And in the SQF fix, you need to define the action that is performed. So you want to delete something, or you want to add something, and a description that will be presented to the user. This specification is developed within the W3C group quick fix support. Nico Kucherauer started this idea of the Schematron quick fixes, and together with him, I'm editor of the Schematron quick fix specification. If you want more details, you can go to the GitHub page or to the W3C community group. You can also ask questions there. You can find examples on the GitHub page if you want to use it. Let me show you now some use cases and some example of quick fix that it will help you to solve different issues. So let's consider you have some sections and you want to enforce to have IDs to all the sections from the document. And you want to specify a form of the ID. So maybe you want to use the title of the section, or you want to generate a random ID with some specific values. So then an action that will automatically generate this type of IDs will be easier, and will help the content writer to add the IDs on the sections. And I will show you an example. Let me close first this. And I have here in the DITA map some sections with missing IDs, and I'm notified that I have here some IDs that are missing, and I have also some actions that will say, okay, add ID to the current section, and it will automatically generate an ID. We can see it here in the outline view, and this is based on the title. So if you don't have a title, for example, for the section, and you'll say that you want to add an ID, it will generate a random ID. But if you have a title, then it will use the section title. And you can also add automatically the IDs to all the sections from the document. So you can have multiple fixes for the same problem and let the content writer to choose which is the best solution for him. Another example, if you have words, for example, in the documentation project, and you want to tag them and you want to mark them as terms, or as in my case, I want to make sure that a link is marked as an XREF, otherwise will not be a clickable link. So you can mark content, and I have an example also for this. So it's a link, and it detects that it's a link and presents the problem to me, but also it offers me a solution to convert this link to an XREF. And then if I click this, it will generate an XREF, and now it's a clickable link and it's correct. So now I'm sure that every time when someone creates something, let's say new content, and says HTTP, I don't know, oxygenxml.com, he will be notified, or they will be notified, and they can convert it very easily to a link as they type. So you can do this also with other type of terms, so you can detect what words you want, and you can tag them as you want. Another interesting example, and a more complex example, let's say, it's if you have a table layout broken. So here I have some missing cells in my table. These with gray are missing cells. So I need to fix this table layout, and it's not easy for me to add each cell. So an action that will automatically add the entire structure will help me to solve the problem, and I'm sure that I will not do other mistakes when I'll correct the table layout. And I'll show you also how this looks like in the application. So I have here also some missing cells, and I can say, okay, I want to add the missing cells in my table, and now I can only add the content very easily. So you can have also more complex quick fixes that will fix the table layout or will make other algorithmic checks. Another example would be if you want to ignore some rules. Let's consider you have some rules, but for you are not in your context, maybe you want to avoid them. And the XML expert can provide you also some fixes that will ignore the current rule or ignore that rule in the entire project, for example. And I will show you how you can do this. I have here, I think, for the IDs. Let's consider that you want to avoid, for example, using this rule in your document, and you can say, okay, I want to ignore this rule because I don't want to add in this topic some IDs, and automatically this rule is ignoring the entire topic. And we see that this is based on a processing instruction that is added at the end of the document that says that this rule will be ignored. So as a conclusion, each project can have its own rules, and you can define business rules using Schematron. Schematron is a language that it applies on the business rule principle, and you can also have Schematron quick fixes in your Schematron that will allow you to easier correct the problem and provide solution to the writer. And you can also generate reports and send them to the user, so you can use a report language, or you can generate an HTML file that will be sent to the user as they are editing the document. So thank you very much for attending. If you have questions, now I can answer to some of the questions.
There are
Alan.
several questions for you, Octavian. I'm going to take over very quickly for the presenting, and then I will start reading the questions to you. Actually, someone was asking for clarification. Schematron, you're not talking about the DITA structure, the DTD. This is something separate. Would you kind of clarify the difference between the DITA structure and Schematron and how those things are validated?
Yes, the DTDs, or you can also apply RelaxNG or XML schema to DITA. So you can define the DITA structure using DTDs or RelaxNGs or XML schema XSD, but this only defines the structure, and it enforces rules related to the data types from DITA. With Schematron, you can add other rules, so it will allow you to add rules that are more specific for your project. So as you've seen in my example, we have rules where we define that in our user guide to have all the titles written with uppercase. So you can add this type of rules, or you can add different algorithmic checks, or you can add rules that check the co-constraints, the dependencies between different values from your documents. So rules that you cannot do with DTD or with other type of schema. So these are different type of rules that you can implement using Schematron, and another layer over the structure of the DITA.
Thank you, that was helpful. You showed an example where you unified basically two parts of or two ordered lists. When you do that, the numbering will continue when you kind of merge those lists together. Is that correct?
Yes, I think I have here the consecutive list. Yes, if I will merge these two lists, the number will continue. Yes, and if I split it, for example, by mistake, it will be 1 2 1 2. So you'll see that there is a mistake here in this list, but also in this case, we enforce a rule that will say, okay, you need to add an explanation about the second list, otherwise it's not okay to have two lists near each other. Maybe you split it by mistake, so you need to merge them.
I have a question about some of the interactive validation you were showing. Can you apply a particular schematron file interactively in the editing window of Oxygen, but not having the full book level validation that you have from the DITA Maps Manager? Is it possible to do just that one file interactively?
Yes, so you can add, for example, let me close these files first. You can add, for example, a rule for a specific file like this. So you can add this XML model processing instruction that will specify the schematron that will apply on this file, only on this file. Here in Oxygen, I can set in the document type association that the DITA, all the DITA files from my project are validated with these rules that are specified here. So all the DITA files are validated with this schematron. But if I uncheck this, now only this rule will apply. So if I remove this
Octavian,
type of rule
I'm
from
gonna
here.
hand the presenting back to you because you're clearly showing something. I'm
Oh,
gonna give the presenting back to you so you can show this. I
okay.
apologize. You have it back now.
Okay, I didn't know that I don't have the
Yeah.
presenting mode. Okay, so if you associate a rule let me undo this. If you associate a rule with an XML model processing instruction here, this will apply only on the current file. So this XML modeling, it will apply only on this file and will present me the problems. If I remove this association from here, then there will be no rule. But I cannot do the association on all my project files. So I can say that for my document type that is DITA, and I'll find it here, the validation will be this one. So it will validate with rule advanced, and I'll check it as default. And now it will use the default validation with the DTDs, but also with my custom rules. So now when I click OK, I will get the problems presented. If I validate again, I think so.
Thank you. And I'm going to leave. I'm
Yeah.
going to leave the presenting capability with you because you may need to show a few other things. Someone is asking about the link to the Git repository for the integrated style guide. Do you have that in a slide where they can see that again?
Yes, let me go to that slide. It's here. So you can go to Oxygen XML GitHub page, and then if you search for integrated style guide, you will find there. Or you can also send me a question on Twitter or on email if you want to.
Sure. And speaking of email, if you have additional questions, please send them to experts@learningdita.com, and we will forward them to Octavian and his team so they can answer those questions. Let's see, we have a few other questions and a little bit more time. Do the business rules come standard with the Oxygen, or is that a special add-in that's additional?
We have some business rules that are defined in the, let's say, in the DITA framework, some generic business rules for DITA, and for example, also to have alternate on the image or other rules. But you can also create your own rules. So we don't have these rules that we presented here in the DITA framework. These are the rules that we use for our user manual that is also a DITA project. And you can find them also on the Oxygen XML GitHub page. Is the user manual and the rules that we apply on our user manual there.
Thank you very much. Have you seen cases where people have used Schematron or the quick fixes to help manage the values for attributes, metadata?
Sorry, I didn't got the question. So if you've
seen anyone use Schematron or Schematron quick fixes to manage metadata and attribute values?
Yes, there are different use cases. In fact, I get a lot of questions related to the quick fix part, and there are different use cases when you want to change different parts from the document, either from attributes or from other documents. You can create a quick fix that will change, I don't know, the other document, the name of the other document, or the content of other document. So you can use quick fixes to do a lot of things. You can extend it to use XSLT in quick fixes, or use other languages like Java to have extension functions that will, I don't know, do more complex operations. The quick fix language defines only 4 operations, and it's simple, but you can extend it more and more if you want. So you can, with the quick fix language, you can only add some elements or fragments, you can remove something, you can make modification with regular expressions in strings, and you can remove something, an attribute or a node, an element or any type of node.
Someone's asking about the order of validation. Do Schematron rules run after schema validation?
Doesn't matter in which order they will be applied. Usually they will be applied in the order that is defined in the scenario. In Oxygen, you can define the order as you want, but if both rules are let's say the DTD's problems and the Schematron problems will be presented to the user, I think there is no doesn't matter which one it's presented first.
Great, thank you very much.